Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CurePSP Virtual Care Conference. We're excited to get things started today with a panel on familial dynamics and role changes. My name is Brittany Concilus. I'm a licensed clinical social worker from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work for the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. I work with our movement disorder teams as well as our epilepsy folks, and I participate in the Center of Excellence for Multiple Systems Atrophy. Previously, I worked in a neuro ICU, so I have seen people throughout the courses of their journey with neurological diagnoses. I'd like to let our panelists take a few minutes to introduce themselves, tell us a bit about their relationship to these diagnoses, and a little bit about what we'll be talking about today. I will start with Laurie.
Thanks, Brittany. Hi, I'm Laurie. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and my mom was diagnosed with PSP in 2023 after a series of pretty significant health issues that began in 2018 and ultimately ended with her passing last spring. The downward spiral of her health started with a back surgery that never fully healed, and then it went on to, over time, include a lot of falls, several bouts of pneumonia, a vascular dementia diagnosis, vision problems, a lot of urinary issues. And these things caused her to be in a wheelchair on oxygen and needing a catheter. And it wasn't until the PSP diagnosis came that suddenly all of these seemingly unrelated things started to make some sense. And that's how I found the CurePSP organization, which has just been a wonderful resource for us. And I'm really happy to be here participating in today's panel.
All right, thank you so much, Laurie. And let's go with Kathy next.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Carter, and I live in Tucson, Arizona. And I was diagnosed with CBD shortly after I retired. I retired at the age of 65 in 2022. And it's been a very interesting journey so far. And it's a journey that's a challenge, and I hope to talk with you all about those challenges today. And please ask any questions you want. We're here to talk about whatever you want.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for all of you for wanting to share your experiences with all of us. And then Tom, can we hear from you, please?
Yeah, so I'm Tom Tait. I live in the great state of New Jersey. My wife was diagnosed with possible MSA-C at the age of 57 in November of 2013. 5 years later, and 2.5 years on hospice, she passed away with a confirmed brain autopsy of MSA cerebellum. Back then, I found CurePSP as a support group for care partners of people with MSA, which I started attending in January of 2014 and started to facilitate in 2017. Also started to co-facilitate all men's care partner of people with PSP, CBD, and MSA support groups for the last 5 years. I've heard stories from hundreds of men and women dealing with their loved ones that have PSP, CBD, and MSA. I sit on the CurePSP Community Advisory Committee, volunteer for Beata Hospice and my local church, happily remarried, have 3 dogs, travel, and of course, I live in New Jersey.
All right, thank you all so much. I appreciate you telling us a little about yourselves. So I think we'll just start with the question to get us all started. Can you each tell us a little bit about how your role in your family or your relationship changed once you received the diagnosis?
So
anybody?
Yeah, okay, that's fine. So we just watched this thing happen. And as soon as we got the diagnosis, the doctor handed us, he handed us a brochure on multiple system atrophy. And you're sitting there going, what is this? And we're reading it. And of course, there is no cure. So it's a terminal brain disease. So you're basically in shock. And it does turn your world upside down, especially a couple of days before Thanksgiving when you're having your whole family over. Are we going to tell them? Are we not going to tell them? How is this all going to happen? It does change roles, even though, I'm pretty self-sufficient, as my wife, Liz, of 40 years, and I met her in high school, as she started to lose capabilities and things like that, you're becoming, I'm the fixer, I'm the MacGyver, I'm going to start fixing things. It does affect, as I say on my calls, it's a family disease, which means it affects everyone. I have 3 sons. They all took it differently. Some of them hit it head on. Some of them didn't want to know about it. They did their research because of the internet now. We talked about certain things about how this was all going to go down. Luckily, they were very supportive of their mother, and me. But I think as far as roles change along the way, they, you're, I guess what happens is, as I watch this disease progress, I'm changing. So, my wife worked and then she couldn't work. My wife drive, she couldn't drive. Eventually, as you go through, and the reasons that I got onto the CurePSP support groups is I wanted to know, what am I in for so that I could prepare for this? The first call that I got on, somebody had lost their wife. It was a really eye opener. And some of the calls that I have in support groups that I have, we have people that have just been diagnosed, or care partners that are just starting to take care of their loved ones, to ones that are, bedridden, on hospice, and just waiting for the call. So I guess where I'm going with this is, yes, it does change, and it becomes your life. It becomes your new world as as Liz started to lose her capabilities, from walking to talking. You're basically in a state of shock, I guess, along the way, and you're grieving. And I didn't understand anticipatory grief. And that's what I had. And one of the social workers that had come out to the house when my wife was on hospice had told me, you have anticipatory grief. Didn't realize that. We went on hospice for 2.5 years, and I volunteered for hospice, and I would highly recommend, when we're struggling with this disease and your loved one, to at least get an evaluation. That's one of the things we did, and I do promote that for everybody. Wherever you are in this process, when you start to struggle, contact local hospice, start looking into that. The other thing is, I've called this disease, this MSA, PSP, and CBD, the long goodbye. It's a tough one, right? But we do have some time. Somebody had mentioned that it's a gift of time. The disease is a gift of time, and what did they mean by that? Is that it's not like an accident where you're with your loved one in the morning, they go off to work and they don't come back home. This one is, you have a chance now to talk about everything you wanted to talk about. And I really, really mention that and suggest that, because you have the chance to talk about those things. So Liz and I sat down and we had the hard conversations. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? How are we navigating this? What do we need? How do we get the kids involved? How do we communicate to the kids? My kids were local. I have people on my support calls where their kids are all over the United States. I recommend, or at least suggest, that they have conference calls with their kids once a month, so that they're all on the same wavelength. When you talk about your mother to your kids, they all get the same story, instead of talking to them one-on-one, because, well, dad told me this and dad told me that. This way the communication is consistent. So I had a lot of support from my family as Liz went through this process. But your roles do change. You become chief cook and bottle washer. Even though I knew how to cook, I became the chef, and whatever I cooked for. My granddaughter was staying with us. I cooked for her, cooked for one of my sons that was still with me. And Liz, basically did not like that, but she you go along the way and you give up these things that you were able to do previously. So I call that micro acceptances along the way. So I accepted the fact that she couldn't drive, so we sold the car. I accepted the fact that she couldn't work. You accept the fact that she I watched her start to put groceries away, and she couldn't do it. She had to go sit down. So I did the shopping, did everything in the household that she used to do. So it was double duty. Luckily, I was working at the time, and they worked with me. They understood my situation. And when Liz passed December 20th, actually I retired that that month. Everything worked out in that regards, but not with her.
I hear you. All right. Thank you for telling us about that. And I heard you mention hospice, and I remember, Laurie, that's something you mentioned as being very helpful for you. In what ways did that kind of contribute to changing things when hospice became involved in your mother's care?
So when my mom's health started declining a lot, several years before she actually got the diagnosis, so much so that I ended up needing to leave my job. So I was a healthcare executive, and I'll get to your question in just a second, but I was a healthcare executive for a large hospital system in Oregon, and I ended up quitting my job in January of 2019 because I just could not juggle. My stepdad also had Alzheimer's, and he was in a memory care facility, and they needed so much care. My mom's failed back surgery. She just needed so much care that I quit my job. In 2019, I took her to 81 medical appointments, and that doesn't count what paid caregivers took her to, what my brother and sister-in-law took her to. That it was a lot. In 2020, when COVID started, we moved her into our house. So I was doing hands-on caregiving that was way outside my comfort zone. I worked for a hospital. I supported the caregivers. I was not a natural caregiver, and I was really uncomfortable with that, but you got to do what you got to do. And my mom was comfortable with it. I just wasn't comfortable with it. So when you're in a parent-child situation, the child becomes almost like the parent, when you're dealing with dementia, vascular dementia, that kind of thing. I was very focused on her safety, and she didn't see that safety was a concern, that her judgment was off. And so we were getting into a lot of kind of conflicts about that, with me almost having to parent her. It was when she was living with me during that time when I could see how much her judgment was off. And that's when we made the decision that she's not going to be able to ever live on her own again, and she's going to need to go into assisted living. But to answer your question, Brittany, fast forward to late 2023, I guess it was, and not too long after her PSP diagnosis, frankly, that she just decided she was done. And, she was in the wheelchair, she was on oxygen, dependent on oxygen, she was with the catheter, and she really couldn't travel anymore. And that was, for her, like, the quality of life was not there anymore. And it took 3 assessments, but eventually she qualified for hospice. And once she got on hospice, things changed significantly for us. And I could just go back to being her daughter instead of having, even though she was in assisted living, there was a lot that I had to do for her, a lot of medical appointments she had to go to, a lot of problem solving. So many times we ended up in the emergency room, a lot of time in the ED that I spent with her. And once she got on hospice, I could just be her daughter again. And the last 4 months of her life was wonderful. I mean, the quality of conversations we had, the time just being together, the sitting, holding hands, watching movies, listening to music. It was amazing. I mean, social worker came in, the chaplain came in, the nurses were there. We had a doctor on call anytime anything happened. And the time that we had during those 4 months was precious, and nothing was left unsaid. And it was like the relationship that we had before she got sick, because I didn't have to be the caregiver anymore. And to Tom's point, hospice is wonderful. I also volunteer for a hospice, and I think people call them too late because they're scared of hospice and they think it means the end. And his wife was on hospice, would you say, Tom, 2.5 years?
Yes, 2.5 years.
My mom was on it only 4 months, but it it was such a huge relief, such a huge relief.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I hear you. And I think both of you touched upon something important. And Kathleen, I saw maybe you have something you want to say, so I'll come to you in a second too. But you both touched upon something important, which is not leaving things unsaid, having those kinds of important discussions. And I think you also touched upon something that some folks run into, which is that sometimes people might be in different places in what they're seeing, what they're feeling about things, and what they're ready to kind of discuss. And that can be a challenge for, I think, care partners and patients to navigate. But yes, I'd definitely like to hear more about your experiences and kind of having those discussions, like the things that you did to make sure you felt like you had fulfilled that, had those discussions and left those and didn't leave those things unsaid.
So, was that for Kathleen or anyone?
To anybody.
Okay.
Yeah. But
So I had kind of heard that during the support calls where these people were passing away, and then guys would have regrets. So I have no regrets because I covered all those bases. I wrote poems, I wrote letters, I recorded some of the things that I would say to my wife to make sure that I said it. And I can look back and say, I said everything I wanted to say to her because I had the gift of time, and that's a horrible thing. The disease is a horrible thing, but it does give you somewhat of a gift of time. However, just as a point, I did have a guy on one of my calls. His wife had multiple system atrophy, and she was walking around. She was doing normal things that she could. 2 weeks later, she passed away. And what happened? She had a heart attack. So, there's other things that happen with the people that are normal, not normal, but, they have diabetes, they have heart conditions and things like that. It's not necessarily the disease that may end their lives. It might be something else. But, back to hospice, it was a wonderful thing. It was a wonderful thing. And when I promote that on my support calls, by the next month or the next support call, I will get, Tom, that was one of the best things I ever did. And it just releases a lot of pressure off of the family. Just like I said, this is a family disease. When you start talking about how everybody looks at this from a different perspective, family members look at this from a different perspective. So sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, everybody, has their thoughts and ideas of how they should take care of their daughter, their sister-in-law, their not their and their mother. But I mean, it's everybody comes at you with their thoughts. Oh, here's a great pill for you. Here's something. Go to Mexico. Go to Europe. Go to France. Did you try this? Did you try that? But I just did a lot of educating them, educating her sister, educating her brother, educating my family, my sisters, her friends, my friends, and that's really what helped. Once you educate them, and they kind of go, oh, I get it now. I get it. But and everybody, this is another one that's interesting. I know a family that had a father that was sick, and the son was not involved. He lived 20 minutes away, but he would not come over. He kind of just ignored the fact that his father was sick. And his sister went to her priest and said, what is going on? Why doesn't he care like I care for, his father? And he mentioned, the priest said, everybody has different levels of love. Everybody has different ways of coping and mechanisms. So it's nothing for us to be concerned about, because if we, we look at other people like, hey, they should be just as interested in this and helping their parents as I am, right? And there's people out there that aren't, and it's just the way that they cope. It's their coping mechanism. It's how they do it. Nobody does it. I guess I should say like we do. And I was with my wife till the end. She passed away in the house. We didn't, we had like hospice showing up. So I was the caregiver for the whole length of time. And I can look back, like I say, and I have no regrets.
I want to just tag on to something Tom just said, and I want Kathleen to have time to talk. But I think something that is important about how people cope differently. So it's my brother and my brother lived about 30 minutes away. My brother was financial power of attorney and I was medical power attorney. But the heavy lifting was for the medical issues with my mom. And my brother wanted nothing to do. He was very clear that he didn't want anything to do with the medical stuff. And that caused a lot of resentment, a lot of conflict between him and I. My sister-in-law was very helpful, but he just couldn't handle anything medical. And in hindsight, I understand that. That was his boundary. He just couldn't handle it. I didn't enjoy it either, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And there was a lot of tension there. And then shortly after my mom's diagnosis, they put their house on the market and moved out of state. That also caused a lot of resentment because I felt very abandoned by that decision. We put some things in place to get me some additional help. But family dynamics, there's a lot of family dynamics coming into play with different sibling decisions. And you have to respect that people make their own decisions for their own reasons. And you have to work through those dynamics and the hurt feelings that come. And my sister-in-law oftentimes would serve as a mediator. And now mom's gone and now we pick up the pieces, right? And we try to figure out how to move forward together with this and do some healing. But it can be very challenging when there are relationships at play.
And I think that can go a little bit back to the anticipatory grief that Tom mentioned as well, that, there is a lot of grief that happens in a lot of avenues in life. I've had people grieve when they left a job. I've had people grieve when they got a diagnosis. I've had people grieve for the relationship they thought they would have and how that's going to look different. I think grief is a large emotion that we contend with when we're talking about, and everybody grieves differently. Absolutely. And we have heard some good stuff from our care partners. I want to bring it to Kathleen so we can hear a little bit of that patient perspective, because I think that's really important too. And your relationships and your role in your families, I'm sure, has also changed with diagnosis. So.
Oh, definitely. Thank you very much. And Tom and Laurie, thank you so much for your insights. Those are really great. It's such a great help. And I hope my husband adopts the idea of hospice early as well. My husband was with me when I was diagnosed with CBD. And of course, we were both in shock and handed a brochure and said, thank you very much. and we did I did a lot of research on the internet and was frightened by what I saw. And I was really happy I found this CurePSP group online. It has been an amazing lifesaver for me, and a mental health saver as well. So one word I want you to keep in mind is proactive. That's going to be key to the quality of your life and perhaps increasing the length of your life. Being proactive. I've been several years now. After I left my 50-hour a week job, I had segued by then into another type of work where I didn't have to stand up all day long, and it was becoming a forensic genealogist, which takes a lot of deep thought as well. So I'm still working part-time, but solving puzzles and really helps me keep those mental synapses still snapping. And then and also preparing a program of like strength training and cardio exercise and also stretching, making sure I encompass all those three things, and making sure I have not the Mediterranean diet, but it's similar to it. It's called the MIND diet, MIND diet. That is very helpful also. So I was looking at things to increase the quality of my life and perhaps the length of my life that I have. So proactive, and also be thinking about, you can be you can go for it so long on one level and then suddenly drop. And you have to be prepared for that. You know, what do you need to have done in your house have that done ahead of time instead of waiting until something happens where you actually need it. You know, decide what types of equipment you're going to need and learn how to work with that before the time actually comes when you need it. That's proactive. Now, my relationship changed a bit because after the shock of that diagnosis, my husband was in denial. He did not want to go to any further medical appointments, and he did not want to. We did go to all of the legal appointments and the banking appointments where I was able to accomplish. And I suggest while you still can, this is one of the first things you can do. It's very important, is to take care of your will and all of your paperwork while you still are mentally capable of doing that. And so I had everything all prepared and taken care of. I also have a magnetic container on my refrigerator I got from Amazon for about $20. And in case rescue people have to come into the house, that's the first place they look, is the front of the refrigerator. And they can, if you have all of your information there, your health information for you and each member of your family, you know, that's perfect. So that's part of being proactive. So my husband has been in denial. And last week I fell, as happens, even though I fell and I was trying to multitask and that did not work. I fell and sprained my ankle. Now, this is a visual thing that happened to me that's keeping me off my feet. So what I'm doing now is I'm using this opportunity. I'm trying to find the silver lining. I'm using this opportunity to train him how to make my coffee and oatmeal and what different kinds of pills I need at different times and what types of workouts that I do. So he's learned more about me in this past week than I think he has in the past 10 years. So, and how to take care of me. Fortunately, he's been very cooperative at taking care of me. He understands a sprained ankle. You know, it's so difficult and overwhelming to understand this and this disease. Now, some of my cousins have been offering me great things like, well, eat 20 apricots a day, or take this thing and take that thing, and all these different types of things to do and I'm not, you know, really into that. I say, thank you very much. I appreciate it. But I don't want to follow that area. But I had an interesting thing happen to me and my mother. My mother is now 91. So when I told her about this, well, shortly before I had found out my diagnosis, my mother was in her late 80s, and she asked me what I wanted to have out of her house, you know, if there was anything I wanted, if something happened to her. And I said, yes, I like this little tiny brass thing we got in England. It reminds me of the fun times we had there when we were playing cards in the evening as a family. It's a little brass card thing. It's for trumps. It'd say hearts, diamonds, clubs, or, you know, spades. And so I said, oh, I love that one thing. And she said, okay, she gave it to me. So when I told her about my diagnosis, she looked at me and she said, I want that card thing back. I'm going to live longer than you. So,
Well, there you go.
yeah, she's in perfect health, and I think she'll live to, you know, she'll be like Keith Richards and the other members of the Rolling Stones. You know, they'll keep on going to 100 and 110 or so forth. So I did give it back to her, but but I just wanted to. I thought that was funny, and just wanted to give some levity.
No, I hear you. It's about finding the humor in a difficult situation. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I think I appreciate that Kathleen kind of brought in the discussion of what kind of things did you do to get ready or to feel prepared while you were kind of stepping into that care partnering role or learn to live with that diagnosis. I remember hearing Tom and Laurie, both of you, talk about some things you did as well to get to be more prepared in your caregiving roles.
Yeah, so that's the reason that I got onto the support calls. And, Kathleen, you mentioned about is there anything you need to do at the house? Well, yeah, we lived in a center hall colonial house. So the bedrooms were upstairs. We figured that that's not going to work because, she would freeze going up the steps and or crawling up the steps. And so we moved, the bedroom down into the living room. And then we had a powder room that I was able to design a handicap shower in and keep the floor all flat, make sure it's perfect, ADA compliant. And then we have a garage that I could pull into with two steps that go up into the house, where I was able to get a portable ramp and put that in there for the wheelchair. So we were prepared. But Kathleen, you mentioned a couple of things, and you mentioned the refrigerator and hanging your pills up there, what you have. I always promote that if the patient can't talk, what do we do? Where is everything, right? Where's my schedule for pills? What kind of pills am I taking? Where are all of my doctors? Where's all of my emergency contact information? And yes, it's hanging up on the side of the refrigerator. We used a dispatch center that Liz had, like a call button. She could press a button, and then inside the house, they would call the house up. They would talk to her if they could. If they didn't hear her, they would call the police, and the police would come out. And instead of knocking the door down, we had a lock box on the front of the door, so that they gave the police the code. They could open it up. They had the key. They were told to go inside the house to the right side of the refrigerator where everything was hanging. And anybody could have looked at that and knew what Liz would need at what time of the day, what her, her routines were, everything that they needed. So I think being prepared is important, and getting the paperwork out up front, like you said, is truly important. And talking about the things that are going to be happening. One of the things amongst many is that we lose our voice. We lose the capability to talk. So we say, so Liz, how are we going to talk? How are we going to communicate? Well, since I was married to her for 40 years, she could look at me, and I knew exactly what she needed. If it was one of these, I knew something was wrong. But is that going to be a wink? Is that going to be, a handhold? Two little things like that means no. One means yes. A speech board, a communications board. The other thing that I learned actually through hospice was writing cards out right now for birthdays that are going to happen somewhere down the road. For the grandkids, writing those cards out now if the patient isn't going to be around. How cool would that be to get a card from your grandmother or your mother for a birthday card, right? The other thing is to read. And these are the books that you can purchase, and you can read the book, for your grandkids or whatever, but your voice is recorded. So, these guys all say, you lose your voice, and now they start thinking about these things. And by that time, it's too late. And when you mentioned something too about roles, right? Depending upon the roles, I've heard the horror stories of not being able to do the books, not being able to do, the banks, paying these things. And you're sitting there going, how does that happen? Well, I know how it happens because one person does it. I think, to communicate that, like you're saying, Kathleen, teach them, how am I going to want my coffee? This is it. I mean, that is like uno number one in this household too. Yeah. I want my coffee and this is the way I want it. So I think that's really nice. And all those discussions come out now, right? All of them. As horrible as it sounds, we discussed the funeral home, brain donation. She wanted to donate her organs. Well, at home, if you're at home, you can't donate your organs, because they don't have you hooked up. So your organs are dying, and so she said, well, then I'll donate my brain. I said, okay. And when I found out that guy lost his wife in 2 weeks to a heart attack, I was immediately panicking, going, oh man, I'm going to get this brain stuff all done and get that out of the way so that, I promised Liz that this is what we're going to do. And I got it done. I hear the stories. My phone number's out there, and people call me up, and I had a guy call me up on a Saturday and say, she wanted to donate her brain. What do I do? And you're like, oh man, it's like, what do you do now? So get everything out of the way. Check those boxes. Like I said, no regrets. What you want to do is you want to think about it on the other side and say, what would I have done differently? And then guess what? Then you do it. When I hear you falling, I promote, fall proof your house. Get rid of the throw rugs. The big one is, and I always bring this story up, it's the glass coffee table. Yeah, because that's a target. And I had a guy fall through a glass coffee table. Liz fell through the bifold doors for the closet, like all these little things. And you just say to yourself, okay, well, that's not going to happen. And then you look and you say, what could possibly happen? Oh, that throw rug right there looks like a trip hazard. Get rid of it. Anyway, they're just some of the things, but I like your idea, just be prepared, be
Thanks,
proactive.
Tom.
Yep,
Yeah,
be
thanks, Tom.
proactive.
Yeah. Proactive is key in everything. And I also want to say regarding my husband and our relationship is when my husband and I were married, we were married later in life. We didn't have children. My husband married me because I was independent and I did things on my own. And he liked that about me. He liked that I wasn't so dependent. So, I had a kind of job where I had to travel, and I'd pick up my little suitcase and say, okay, bye, honey, I'm going to be gone for 3 days. I'll see you, when I get back. Now I wonder, will he still love me when I'm dependent?
Yeah. And that must be a difficult question to try and grapple with. And I'm sure those are questions a lot of patients and care partners find themselves asking. I was a different person when we entered this.
Yes.
And how does that change things
Right.
for my partner or for me? So I hear that. I can recognize that. That must be very difficult to grapple with.
It is. And the one regret I have so far is my husband has huge collections of books and posters and things all over. And my one regret is that and he's 5 years older than myself, that I didn't ask him to take care of that, to whittle down the collection. Because there's, if we have to move into a smaller place, who's going to be taking care of all this stuff? If something happens to me where I suddenly have dementia, I can't, mentally cope with it, and he passes away, no one knows anything about his collection, so they wouldn't know who to contact and so forth. So I've talked to a few other people about that, to take care of that part of it. But yeah, one regret I have is not at the age of 65. I donated a lot of stuff, cleaned out my part of the house, but I didn't make the same request to him so that he move everything out. And then the other thing I did for my husband was I made a notebook with all kinds of instructions in it. It had an annual calendar saying, this is the month the house insurance is due. This is the month the house taxes are due. This is the month the car insurance is due. I made a calendar like that for him. And then inside the notebook, the 3-ring binder are the little plastic page holders of all of the different insurances, everything about the dog, how often the dog needs to be groomed, who his doctor is, and what types of shots he needs and when. So I made a notebook like that. And if you're not sure how to make one or how to put one together, there's a professional one that I recommend, and it's called NOK box, knock box, next of kin box, that you can buy. And it is pretty much pre-made for you with a lot of the information. So it costs about $100. The one I did, I kind of looked at that and did it by myself. But I looked at every aspect of our life to see what he might need to know.
Nice.
And then that's what I I put everything in there I could relating to it, and I update it as much as I can.
Nice.
So what I'm hearing in that is that your role has changed, but you're still kind of fulfilling this role you already had in the family, which was being the person kind of preparing these things and looking out for those things. You're still doing that. It's just manifested itself in a different way for you
Yeah.
at this period of time. And that kind of brings me back to something Tom mentioned with how difficult it is to have a lot of those conversations with your loved one, with your family member. And it's very painful to have those conversations. It's coming out of a place of love, but at the same time, I'd like to reframe that. And what a gift that you gave your wife in allowing her the space to have those conversations and normalizing having those conversations, because those were things, I'm sure, when you receive a diagnosis of something like MSA, PSP, CBD, that you start wondering about those things. And so to embolden those conversations and those discussions, you're giving her back some of the autonomy that a diagnosis like MSA can take away from individuals. So I hear that. I'm sure those were painful conversations. And I'm also grateful to hear that you had the opportunity to have those.
Yeah,
So, Brittany, can I speak a little bit about this?
Please.
Yeah. So, where to start? So, first of all, I'm really grateful to my mom, because when she and my stepdad first moved to Oregon in 2016, she already had their trust set up, their powers of attorney taken care of. My stepdad was 10 years into his Alzheimer's diagnosis at that point. So she'd long before then gotten those documents already done and taken care of. So we didn't have to worry about any of that. Unfortunately, my sister had passed from a brain tumor when she was in her 30s. So I had already been through the process of having to have some of those difficult conversations. And, we just are a very practical family about those kinds of conversations. And my mom's been a really good role model. And I just thought this is how people do it. My husband's family's opposite. Like, his mom won't even talk about anything. Like it's like trying, like, Fort Knox to get information out of her. So I didn't really realize how lucky our family is that my mom is so open about these things. And so, she had those documents together. Practically speaking, little things like how to deal with some of the safety issues. I had to deal with that on the fly. Like, she kept literally she'd fall out of her wheelchair. So getting a seat belt for her wheelchair, the trip hazards and stuff like that. Her assisted living facility took care of that. I was taking her a lot of places in my car, and, getting her wheelchair in and out of my Acura was killing my back. And so I started taking my husband's minivan because I didn't have to lift it as high. I got one of those little gadgets that you can hook onto the latch in the car that my mom could use as a support to pull herself up to get it in the car. Little things like that we just sort of figured out as things went along. When things got closer, in terms of getting on hospice, I had read a book where in the book they mentioned something about the 5 wishes document. And if you Google 5 wishes, I think it might even be 5wishes.org. It's a document that you can purchase. I think it was like $5. And it walks you through some of the basics that are on like the POA and the end of life, but it gets even more detailed about what do you want your end of life experience to be? What kind of music do you want to have? Who do you want your loved ones? Who do you want there? What do you want your celebration of life to look like? And so we sat down, my mom, myself, my brother, my sister-in-law, and used that document to have some hard conversation. It was a good conversation, but it was hard. And, some of it was funny, like that's where we talked about the brain donation and like my mom's like, well, because, you can't get a confirming diagnosis of these diseases unless you do brain donation. And she's like, well, I want to know. And I'm like, but Mom, you're not going to be here. And she's like, it took her a minute, like, the light bulb cut. Oh, that's right. But don't you want to know? And I'm like, okay, so it was kind of a comical conversation, But, it was important to get those wishes documented. And then I knew as her medical POA, I needed to fulfill that. And it was emotionally hard for me to figure out how to make that happen. But I knew I had to get those things lined up before she passed, because there's certain things that you have to do. You have to have your loved one, refrigerated or the head packed in ice within an hour of passing. You have to have that stuff ready to go. And she was in assisted living, so I had to have everything lined up, and I had to have the social worker with hospice help me figure that out, because I couldn't emotionally make those calls. So we made it happen, and we carried out our wishes. The thing, it was very impactful. This process of helping her pass the way that she wanted to pass was very impactful to me. And end of life planning is hard, but it's a huge responsibility to do it well and to make sure that you make it easy on your loved ones. And I have a folder in that file cabinet over there that says, you need this when I die. So it's got red letters on it, so that if I pass unexpectedly, my husband has everything he needs, or my son has everything he needs. And after my mom died, I did the 5 wishes. I'm only 56. I did the 5 wishes document for myself. I gave a copy to my husband. I said, look, you need to do this. We set up our trust. We did the power of attorney stuff. Like, neither of us have any diseases that make us think we're going to die anytime soon. But I didn't want my son or my niece, who may be caring for us, to wonder about these things. I wanted to get it all written down. My mom encouraged me to write a book about our experience. I did that this year. I published a book about our journey together. I'm going to do a little self-promotion here. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's called The Long Fade to Morning. And I'm really proud of it. And it's to support caregivers. It's about our journey. It's about my mom's journey and my journey. And I want caregivers to feel seen in this really hard journey that we go through. And a lot of it is also because I want my son and my niece, who will probably be taking care of me, to know what to do and what not to do, because there's some lessons in here about it's hard and what I would have done differently if I could. So they're hard conversations, but they're conversations that need to be had.
And as a patient, I'm using this time to say to my husband and my family all the time, thank you. I appreciate you. I love you.
Yep. Very nice.
That goes back to that sentiment of not leaving things unsaid that Tom has talked about. I do want to be mindful. We have about 10 minutes left here in the talk. So I just want to kind of circle back to each of you and see if there's, any advice you want to leave folks with, or anything that you want to make sure we don't leave something unsaid in the time we have here to speak with everyone. I'll look for Tom first, maybe. Look at Tom first, maybe.
Yeah. So the only thing that I have thoughts of is joining a support group. I mean, I have to promote them so big that there was so much that I got out of these things that, I'm a broker of information from hundreds of people with hundreds of ideas and thoughts and tips and tricks and all those little things that we need to know along the way. They're all up here. Maybe I should write a book, but and I think that's really nice to do all that stuff and have that documented. But I just say, don't create frustration with your loved one. Allow them to make decisions, because that's all they got. I had a guy, he's on this journey, and his wife didn't want him to have chocolate. And I went, hey, I'm not a doctor, have chocolate. I had another guy on the phone from California. He was depressed. I'm talking to him and I go, why don't you just go have a drink? And he starts laughing. He says, I'm an alcoholic. And I said, look, I'm not a doctor. Just go do what you want to do. Like if you don't want to eat, don't eat. If you want chocolate, have chocolate. So, that's the end of life. It's, how Laurie, you were talking about just making it how it was so great that you had hospice there at the end. And that's what hospice is about. And I would also say, uh, check hospice out sooner than later.
Yeah, I hear you. And Kathy, can we hear a little from you? Kind of some closing thoughts?
Yes, definitely. Caregivers, please join the different talks, because they'll give you an idea of what's to come. And it's a great resource for all the different products that you'll need. And you'll hear firsthand experiences about how those products, some might work better than others. And here's the pros of this product and the cons of this product and versus another product. So it's very important so that you will know what's coming up. You won't be unprepared and like a deer in the headlights. And give yourself, as caregivers, give yourself some grace. You're doing the best you can. You're doing all you can. And please give yourself some grace. And I'm giving myself some grace, and I'm giving my husband grace and space to make mistakes, because we're not perfect. And just to keep that compassion there between. It's so easy to get frustrated as a patient and as a caregiver. And I think just giving everyone a little bit of space and grace is makes a happier relationship.
Absolutely. And Laurie, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what Tom said about the support groups. I think self-care is so important, and it is so easily put to the side when you're busy juggling life, work. Many of us are part of the sandwich generation, still have kids at home. We're, caring for parents and kids, or, caring for your spouse. And you just, there's a lot that we're juggling in life, and it's easy to put ourselves last. And, think about it from the concept of putting your own oxygen mask on first, right? That's what they tell us whenever we're on an airplane. So we need to think about that when we're caring for our loved one, and find a way to carve out a little bit of time for yourself. I'm not somebody who has ever been able to meditate, but I discovered the beauty of floating in a saltwater tank. And I started doing that weekly during this process. And it was akin to meditation for me. And it was just amazing for me. And so I started doing that. Make sure you get your regular doctor's appointments in, go to a support group, whether it's, your church chaplain that you talk to, or friends, or whatever, or therapist. I also I did support groups. I did therapy. I had to go on an antidepressant. There's everything, the whole gamut that you might need to do. But don't neglect yourself, because if you get sick, who's going to take care of your loved one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you deserve that self-care.
I hear you. Thank you for bringing that up, Laurie. That's so important. I hear from so many of our care partners, I haven't been to my own doctor in a long time. And, it's hard to fit that in. Obviously, the patient has, you mentioned 83 doctor's appointments, I think, once for your mom, or 81 in a year. So obviously that takes a lot of time. And so, what can I let go of? This normal PCP checkup that I go to every year, because I'm usually fine when I go there. So that's important, I think, to make sure that people are carving out that space for self-care, both from the patient perspective and the care partner perspective is so important to care for yourself. And that prevents not only you having something that happens to you as the care partner, but also kind of helps with burnout and helps with those emotions that come up with things as well. Yeah, I hear that. And maybe we can hear a little bit from Tom and Kathleen about how you've cared for yourselves or how you did care for yourselves with these experiences as well.
Yes. So I started mindfulness meditation when Liz got diagnosed with multiple system atrophy, and I still do it to this day. I said I was happily married, and we both do mindfulness meditation every day. It's a great thing, Laurie, what you're doing for yourself, and what the mindfulness meditation did for me. They would come out to the house. The hospice people would come out to the hospice or to my house, and they would go, "What are you doing?" I said, "How are you coping?" They said, and I said, "I don't know. I'm doing mindfulness meditation." "Oh, what program is it?" "Oh, yeah, here it is. It's called Headspace." Give them a little shout out. But the one nurse went out in her car, and she comes back in. She says, "I ordered that. My sister got it. My son got it." It just so happened that my Cynthia, my new wife, had done the same thing. And, when we got together, she said, "Oh, I do mindfulness meditation." I said, "Really?" So it's been, I mean, we'll do it tonight together. Every night we do mindfulness meditation. It's a beautiful thing. It just keeps you present. It tells you, that this whole deal tells me what's important in life. It's a lesson that's learned. And to Kathleen's point, we always change along the way. We're different today than we were yesterday, and it's the deep rooted love that keeps you going with your significant other. It's not, we know that it's not you, it's the disease. So that's what I said.
Yeah.
So we're reaching the end of our time here, but I want to look to you, Kathy. Let's end with you on, how are you taking care of yourself? What have you done for yourself through all of this?
I make sure to exercise every day.
Mhm.
And even right now, I'm doing chair exercises with my sprained ankle. I'm still exercising, make sure I eat the best food, and make sure I get 8 hours of sleep every day. And then once a month, I'll treat myself. I might have a massage, or I might have a facial,
Nice.
or I
Great.
might get my hair cut, or
Perfect.
I might have some acupuncture done. But
Mhm.
I look forward, I make sure I look forward to a treat, at least once a month to treat myself, and having something to look forward to like that, or travel, which I dearly love, is wonderful.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for your vulnerability and sharing with us today. I think there's so much value in these lived experiences. I've certainly learned from you today, and we'll take that into the work I'm doing with patients and families moving forward. But thank you all for being here today with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Brittany.
you.